The illusion is that change takes time. The truth is, change happens the moment you decide. You don't need more time. You need a shift in being. You see, there are infinite versions of you, each living a life shaped by a different choice. The question is, which one will you tune into? One decision, one gentle pivot, and the entire path unfolds differently. Don't underestimate how powerful one moment of clarity can be. The universe responds the second you align. So, if you're wondering what to do, just listen. The version of you who already chose is calling you home.
There's an old Zen koan. It goes like this. Everyone has two lives, and the second life begins the moment you realize that all along you only had one.
Our God has no rules, only ceremonies to know him better. Or no rules.
I told myself, when I meet God, it will be the first thing I ask him. Why make a world of such wonder and fill it with monsters? Why make flowers and then snakes to hide beneath them? What purpose does the tornado serve? Then it hit me. He didn't make it for us.
A little bit about myself. I'm in a polyamorous relationship with two life-size companion dolls. I also do up-close sex magic. I both read and masturbate to tarot.
Is this for real?
Happy heresies and welcome to the desert of the real and happy holidays. Welcome to Aeon Byte. Welcome to the desert of the real and the virtual Alexandria. The world is an illusion trying to change you, as V&V Nation said, and here we are going to stop that. Here you come to write your own gospel and live your own myth. Here you come in these Gnostic times, Philip K. Dick world and age of Hermes. My name is Miguel Connor, and as always, I am your Pompatus of Gnosis, that madman across the waters, that smell of colitas rising through the air of a world gone mad. And that introduction you heard is just wrong. Completely immoral. As I've said, I do not masturbate to tarot. I masturbate to the I Ching. Come on, man. I'm a proper kind of person, and you know that. So awesome. Great to see everybody here, if you're live or on the replay. And again, I hope you're having a great solstice season and whatever you celebrate. And today, I'm very excited to have back Stephen Mandes Thomas to discuss an appropriate book for this Gnostic Christmas special, and that is his book, The Sacramental Magic of Advent, a guide to Christian ceremonial ritual at Christmas. Stephen, thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me back on. I'm happy to be here.
Pleasure is all ours, and yeah, good book and something that can add so many dimensions to your spiritual and magical life through the holidays and throughout the year. So yeah, you hit it out of the Canoma Park. And with us too, we've got the Moondog Vance. Vance, how are you doing this morning on this eve of Christmas Eve?
Yeah, pretty good. I hope you got those naughty hexagrams I sent you the other day.
If it works,
and,
it works.
But the Pentavrit's pretty funny. I just watched that myself, actually. Watched it. But anyway, that's where that's from. But I'm very much looking forward to getting my Christmas spirit, have a little bit of a Gnostic boost here. So
that we shall do. That we shall do. Awesome, and good to see people on the chat. Again, we are changing things on AM Byte. I'll be rolling out the features in the next week or two, so don't worry about super chats. Of course, if you want to support the show, we won't say no. Always appreciate you keeping the lights of the pleroma on and this red pill cafeteria growing. All right, Stephen, so tell us about this book. Why did you write it, and what's going on here?
All right, great place to start. So this was actually the first book I wrote. It's the second book published. And what happened, wrote it about 4 years ago as a series of blog posts because I had just out of the blue, I had received ordination into minor orders in a version of the Liberal Catholic Church, which is an independent sacramental church. It was autumn. It was moving toward Christmas time, and I was like, I'm just going to start pulling up the old traditions that followed the wheel of the year from, in this case, would be from Hallowmass or All Souls Day through to Christmas and onward to Epiphany. And I'm going to see what I can do with them from a magical perspective. And I think that it was the ordination that really gave a boost. It was like a current flew through me, and I was writing every single day and putting this together. And at the end of it, I was like, oh, this isn't a series of blogs. This is a book. But I sat on it for a couple of years, and then I sent it out to a publisher last summer. What happened with it then was I realized I got to the end of the book, and I present an initiation at the end of the book. So you can do this initiation, and it has a lot to do with works of magic that you might perform going forward. And I was like, wait a minute. Okay, I'm at the end of the book. I'm giving you an initiation into Christian magical practice. I should probably write another book which teaches you how to do magic.
Right.
And that became what's now my first book. But the Sacramental Magic of Advent, it's not a sequel to the other book. You don't need the one to use the other to use the one. It's entirely its own thing, and it covers the holiday season, as we're now calling it, from the beginning of Advent through to Christmas, and then the 12 days of Christmas from Christmas itself to Epiphany.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And yes, two good books. And for the audience, check out my interview with Stephen back in September, October. God, time flies. It's like, I don't even want to look at 2026 because it's going to be a blink of the eye. But I guess first, before we look at some of the approaches on how to deal with the holiday season, what do you mean by sacramental magic?
Good question. So that's the term that I'm using to describe the entire system of magic that I'm putting together in these books. And the idea is that we can take the rituals and the traditions from the history of Christendom, that's largely Roman Catholicism, Orthodoxy, the sacramental Christian tradition. And we can set aside the dogmas, and we can set aside the institutional authority that kind of has these things in a box, and we can approach them through the lens of occult philosophy. When I say occult philosophy, I mean the magical tradition as you see it in the works of people like Dion Fortune, Eliphas Levi, my friend John Michael Greer, but going all the way back also through the works of people like Agrippa and Ficino and into ancient times, where the foundation of it turns out to be Neoplatonism. And all of that does, I'll say one more thing about it, it allows you to take this stuff and make it work again, and make it work on your own without needing anybody's permission and without supervision, let's say, from authority figures in the church.
Awesome. And well, let's get into again, like I said, some of the events, the holiday events. So how does your book, or how would you approach from the esoteric Christian magical stance, the winter solstice in the Christian year? What does it symbolize?
Oh, it's a good place to start, because here we are
in Rome.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the solstice, of course, is the darkest time of the year. Everybody knows that. And what happened, those 3 days around the solstice, it doesn't really look like the light's growing at all. Technically, the day after solstice is a little bit lighter, but unless you've got a really good sundial, you're not going to notice it. It's really December 25th, a few days later, that things start to become visibly lighter. And that's the point at which the spiritual light, which is Christ, enters the world. Now, the solstice itself can approach it in a couple of different ways, because we also have this tradition of linking the seasons of the year to the cycle of the four classical elements, which this is found all over the world too. You'll find it in China, you'll find it in India, but in the Western tradition, of course, that's fire, air, earth, and water. And the way that we usually organize this is to assign the element of earth to winter.
Mm-hmm.
So the winter solstice is sort of the peak of elemental earth, while the summer solstice would be the peak of fire, and the other two on the quarters there. Now, what do you do with that? And this is where I'm drawing from other traditions as well. In the first case, you can simply do a ritual. You could do a little prayer to the sun and to Uriel, who's the archangel, who we see as the archangel governing the element of earth.
Mm-hmm.
You can also elaborate the thing, and you can draw it out into a larger practice to balance that elemental energy in your own life. Because what does earth symbolize? If to draw a terminology from China, that's like great yin, the darkness, the silence, the stillness. Earth is solidity. Earth, I think I did it a little differently in the book, but in the older tradition, they would have seen it as the virtue of justice. And it also has its corresponding vices. It's also laziness and greed.
Mm-hmm.
So working with the element and leaning into this time of year when the element is strongest will then allow you to cultivate the virtues and the powers and to expel the kind of toxic effects of earth. So those are the ways we can do it.
Yeah, you also talk about, Stephen, the doing sort of a solstice dinner. Well, you talk about sitting in total darkness, contemplation, lighting a single candle to signify, yes, the rebirth of light as the sun goes down. And you also talk about, a solstice dinner too with the family, right? Before darkness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great way to do it. That specific ritual, I like it because it's very, very simple. Anyone can sit in darkness and light a candle. You don't even need any props. And what you do with dinner, of course, is up to you. I don't remember if I said this or not, but it would be a nice time to have solar food. So in the old tradition, everything, the web of correspondences, say, extends through all of nature. So if you're eating chicken spiced with rosemary, that's a very solar dish, right? It would be a nice way to honor this sort of rebirth of the light of the sun. And also in its heat, it counteracts the cold of the time of year. So you get everything at once.
Sounds like a good celebration. Yeah, so many ways to do it. And December is often described as, you might say, the dark season, period. Everything slows down. It's after the spirits are out, obviously, in many traditions. This is really kind of the Halloween because the ghosts are all out. And that's why, the English and the Scandinavians love their monsters and spirits and ghosts this time of the year. What are some rituals you can do from an esoteric Christian tradition? Just the same old fasting, praying, almsgiving, or what do you recommend?
Well, with December, there's so much to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are so many little points on the wheel. December, most of the season of Advent, which is the season, of course, which leads up to Christmas, is contained in the month of December. A little spillover into November, right? And it'll vary year by year. But again, there's so much during that time. It's definitely a time for spirits of the dead. Traditionally, actually, it's also even a good time to die.
Mm.
This is when we're closest to the world of the dead. So it's kind of like, you just kind of can quickly jump ship.
So therefore, this more support that Die Hard is a Christmas movie, just from the title. Okay.
It absolutely is. I wrote about that on my blog the other day. Great film.
Yeah, it's not Christmas until Hans falls from the building.
Exactly. And in addition to that, like I talked about, there are all these forgotten saints' days in December. Forgotten or half forgotten. Like we've got Saint Nicholas. The first one actually at the beginning of Advent is Andrew, and then you've got Nicholas, and you've got Lucy, and you've got Thomas. And these days, like we have Saint Nicholas kind of, but really he's been kicked off of his own holiday and rolled into Christmas. St. Lucy, people don't remember. St. Thomas, the church actually took his holiday, canceled it, and moved it to the summer, which is like deciding we're going to have Thanksgiving in June. It just doesn't really work. St. Andrew, who kicks it off. If you have the slightest trace of Scottish ancestry, that's a good one. But even if you're not a drop of Celtic blood, there's this St. Andrew Novena, which you do a series of prayers starting on his feast day and going until Christmas. And it's an absolute miracle worker. So a lot of stuff to do. And if you want to get even spookier about it, might be a nice time for necromancy. I didn't put any necromancy as such in this book. That might be a future volume, but if you know how to do it.
Right, for sure. And you advice you can do in 12 days of Christmas. Your true love is telling you to fast instead of all this wonderful stuff that the song gives you.
Right. Yeah, and so the fasting season is traditionally Advent, the days which lead up to Christmas. Christmas itself is a 12-day party. This is one of the things that I like about these old customs, because we're so used to thinking about the past as this time of drudgery and slavery. And in every show which is supposedly set in this broad period that they'll just call the Middle Ages, everybody's dressed in gray and they're upset and they're working in the fields all the time. But they invented a 12-day holiday. You can't imagine an American taking a 12-day holiday. That's your entire vacation period. That's your whole 2 weeks that you got for the year done at once.
Yeah, different times. Yeah, I do remember growing up in Portugal and Mexico. So much less commercial, but there was always festivities every day leading to Christmas. Most of them religions, but there was always good food, toys, sugary drinks, and a lot of music. So I do remember it with a lot of fondness. And magic. It was much more magical.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. How do you approach the idea of what is a saint? I mean, obviously, the church has certain rules, rubrics that you have to do to be a saint. You know, one miracle, is it 2 miracles, etc. But from a magical perspective, how would you define a saint?
That's good. That's good. And to really answer it, we might need to start from the beginning. So the way that I approach magical philosophy in this and my other books is this model of the planes, right? Where you start with the one and the divine, and you go downward through what's called the intellectual plane, the astral plane, which is ordinary consciousness, the physical plane, which is the material world. Now, when you look at that intellectual plane, in English, intellectual has the context, or the connotation rather, of like a university employee who reads too much and has a lot of opinions, but that's not what it actually means. Intellect in this sense is a higher form of consciousness. It's closer to what we might think of as intuition, where it's an immediate knowing. It's knowing without mediation. So if you want to learn something normally, you have to think through it. Start with 2, add another 2, and 1, 2, 3. Okay, I've got to 4. Intellect is that higher consciousness which knows automatically, intuitively, and entirely. And that intellectual plane is also, it's intellect or intellectus in Latin. In Greek, it's nous. And the angels themselves, the angels are called noetes or nooses, intellects, or intelligences by the earlier writers. So part of the idea here is that the point of human incarnation is to slowly rise on the planes. We start out as souls in bodies. So our consciousness is on this astral level. A lot of times it's ordinary thinking. Maybe it descends downward into this kind of subordinary thinking that's become normalized these days, where it's just a lot of reactive rage and passion.
Mm-hmm.
And you can slowly raise up until it's these sort of higher emotions, states of love, states of gratitude. And the idea is that in this work, you're transforming yourself and you're awakening to life on the next plane up, so that eventually you stop having to get spat back out on the wheel into material incarnation, and you become embodied on that intellectual plane. That's a big explanation, but the point of it is, saints in this way of, from this way of looking at things, are people who have gone through the cycle. They're now established at the same level as the angelic beings or the gods of the ancient world, maybe. Some of them at least. And part of the way we know this is that traditionally, all the saints start to develop myths. And myths are really different from histories. Today, what the church wants to do with saints is it wants them to be just a bunch of like really nice guys who will pray for you if you ask them. And you should ask them nicely and all this stuff. And they want to do what they call demythologization. They want to, so a famous saint, not in this book, might be Saint George. And his myth is that he went out and he fought and he killed a dragon. Well, historically, there aren't any dragons, probably. And George was probably just a really nice guy from Rome. And he was in the army for a bit and then he left the army. And that's completely boring. But the problem with it isn't just that it's boring. It's that myth itself has a specific property with relation to that intellectual plane. Myths are stories. And the old, we did this last time, but let's do it again. Myths are stories that never happened, but always are. So a myth is a story which reveals an eternal truth, in the same way that a mathematical formula, like the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A squared was never walking down the street one day, ran into B squared, and they got together and brought forth baby C squared 9 months later. It's something that always is. It's not a happening. And myth is the same. And now we come back to the saints, because what happens is that they're people who then become mythic. And this suggests that they're people who have transcended time and space, and we can now contact them mythically. So they're now acting on and from the intellectual plane.
Well said and makes sense. And well, let's look at something that is extremely mythical today, and that is the Christmas tree. We all got a Christmas tree, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about the Christmas tree from an esoteric perspective.
I'm looking over at my tree in the corner of the room here. The tree is... This is really one of my favorite things. Like, this is such a... It feels, if you were to step out, you know, from a 1,000-year remove, it feels like you're looking at some ancient pagan custom. And of course, it was invented by Christian Germans sometime in the early modern period. And that's what's so cool about it. Like, the magic is alive now. It's not ancient. It is, but it's also not. It's right there today. To understand the Christmas tree, you have to think about what trees symbolize. A tree is always a link between the worlds, right? We can think of Yggdrasil, the world tree in Norse mythology. And that's the tree, the axis mundi, which all the worlds are kind of hanging from it like fruit. And so we know that it's a link between human beings and the divine. You can imagine climbing up a Christmas tree and finding yourself in heaven or something like that. On the other hand, we didn't build it, we didn't make it. There are similar symbols which are made by human beings. You could think of the central post of a house was often a place of worship in ancient times. That was made by somebody. The chimney down which Santa Claus comes, that's another type of the axis mundi. But they're artificial, made by people. The tree is created by nature, and it's an image of life, and it's green all year round, suggesting both the link between human beings and the divine, and this overflowing life which is always present. And there's also, yeah, there's one other thing, like this isn't in my work now, but there's also hints that there's something even deeper there. And that's where you go to Margaret Barker, who talks about how the sacred tree was a representative, an image, a place of worship for the female aspect of the divine, for the great lady in the temple.
It was, yeah, symbol of Ashira, or the Queen of Heaven, that being, and got chopped down with the reforms of Josiah and Hezekiah and all those guys. Yes, of course. So, and yeah,
I've got one. I've got one that just occurred to me this morning. This is one of the great things about the show, right? I was looking at my Christmas tree, which is just over to my right, and I realized one of the things I love about it are all the lights, right? And all the little ornaments that we have that represent things we like. And then it hit me. Each light is like that spark that we all have of the divine, and the star at the top of the tree is, the one, when it symbolizes how the consciousness spreads, because it's really one energy, right? One energy that spreads throughout the tree, and it's kind of a symbol of conscious existence itself. So
that is so good.
Aroma, or a little aroma.
Yeah. That is a great image. That was like a little download.
Absolutely.
And we could play with the myth too. What are the balls, and of course you have the demiurge, which is the lion-headed little cats when they come and destroy and try to mess around with the divine order, right? Climb the tree.
I think Christmas balls are the representative of the material things in our lives, because they're just kind of nondescript material there. But we hang both Christmas balls and little animals. We got a lot of Star Trek Enterprises hanging up in there, and so forth. Things that we enjoy, things that are parts of our lives. So it's a mixture of our spark and the things that surround it.
Yeah, so it's an image of the whole created order descending from the divine through the material presence at the bottom of the tree.
Exactly.
Good analogy, good symbolism, good modern myth. And also you talk about how after Christmas, the tree doesn't have to just be discarded like some useless toy. I mean, my wife and I go back and forth between synthetic trees and real trees, and we debated. I don't think there's ever going to be a winner, and we switch sides and all that. But you talk about how after in January you can still, we keep our tree till like after the Magi and January 6th, and sometimes we celebrate the Greek Orthodox Christmas just to keep the tree even longer, just to have it longer in the lights and all the beauty. But you say you could actually make tea and incense out of a tree, right?
Oh, there's so much you can do with it. I prefer the real Christmas trees too, but you should definitely turn it into a sacred activity. Even from before we cut the tree down, I'll usually go out and I'll say a little prayer. We'll go, I take my kids, my wife, we go and we cut down a tree. I always make a little offering to the tree spirits, cut it down and bring it home. Everybody knows that one family where the tree's tossed out onto the curb on December 26th. And, to each his own, but don't be that guy. It's just, there's so much more you can do. You do have to be careful because it does depend on what variety of tree you have. But there are a lot of uses you can get out of a Christmas tree. Pines, I think spruces, a lot of different evergreen trees you can make tea, and it's actually very nourishing. If you have a cedar, maybe be more careful. I don't know if that's common. You want to be a little careful with incense too, because it can go nuts. But it's a great incense, really good for clearing space. And what I usually do, I don't toss it out onto the curb. I just chop it up for firewood. And then it becomes a symbol of the old year giving way to the new, because we'll usually burn the last of the Christmas tree either at the spring equinox or on May Day in our fire pit out back. And it's like, thank you to the winter. The winter spirits depart, the spirits of spring enter in.
Very nice, very nice. Let's see, Vince, do you have a question, or you see any questions from the audience?
Looking for questions, not seeing any so far, but oh boy, we got a marking dog here. We have one of the Barcons.
He has a question, perhaps. Can I pee on the Christmas tree? Would that be sacrilege?
Too much of that going on lately, I'll tell you. Well, yeah, I was thinking, how about I think the image of Santa Claus is kind of interesting because it parallels the parallels the Orthodox version of God in a way, the punishment or the gifts and so forth. And what are your reflections on that?
Santa's really cool. I've been thinking a lot about Santa lately. I've got my Santa teacup here. And
oh yeah,
this is the Gnostic show, so maybe we can go as out there as we like. I think there are 2 or maybe 3 levels on which Santa manifests. Santa's a real spirit. There's this kind of thing that we do to children where we teach them that he's a real guy, and then we reveal to them that he's fake. And I really think that that is a ritual initiation into the cult of materialism. I think that's a moment where we are training them to see things just in material terms. And after that, their faith is kind of shaken in everything a little bit, right? But the thing about it is, it's not true. He's not fake. He's just not an elderly gentleman living in Canada.
It's a myth. He's not historical, but he always has been.
Yeah.
He's true.
Yeah, symbolic. Yeah.
Exactly. And so when you see, if he's not real, I can look around and see like 5 Santas in the room with me. So clearly that's real. Moreover, those Santas I see in the room with me are part of this whole cultural pattern which shapes and structures people's behavior. And it's not a pattern we have any control over either. It's a pattern that just kind of does what it does on its own. When you see that, the proper way to understand that, okay, this is a spirit. Now, then the question is, what kind of spirit is it? And here's where I've been getting more out there even than usual lately. So there's this idea in Plato that other kinds of spirits have a terrestrial and a heavenly manifestation. So with Aphrodite, the goddess of love, there's Aphrodite Pandemos, who's ordinary, everyday love. That's the goddess who's going to unite people together. And there's Aphrodite Urania, who's heavenly love. And that's the power of love that draws you upward toward the divine. The way I'm thinking about it these days is that Santa Claus that acts as an everyday spirit and brings gifts and puts them under the tree, that's like Santa Pandemos. Okay? The everyday Santa. Still a spirit. And the symbolism is still really rich there, because what does he do? He either brings gifts or he brings coal. In everyday practice, no kid ever gets coal, but they kind of do, because you can imagine one family where a kid opens up a lump of coal and the lump of coal turns out to be chocolate and the whole family's laughing. And that's a coal that turned out to be a gift. And then you can imagine another family, and these really do exist, where the 16-year-old girl gets a Ferrari instead of a Lamborghini and throws a temper tantrum. Then the gift becomes coal. And that's our everyday Santa Pandemos, weaving together communities, families, and sort of distributing justice in a way. And then you go a little more out there and you take it even further and you say, what are the images in the Santa myth? Okay, he descends from the north. He doesn't live in Canada or in the Arctic Ocean. So what's in the far north is the North Star. What's the North Star? It's the star at the top of the tree again. The North Star is the central point around which the heavens turn. And in that sense, it's a visible image of the One, the center of the divine. 7 stars turning about it, the 7 spirits before the throne, a magical being, a spirit who descends from on high, distributing gifts. So that form of Santa becomes, like Vance was saying, an image of the distribution of providence by God and the angels through the world.
Mm.
And again, it's a gift or a lump of coal according as you deserve it.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, very Neoplatonic, very Gnostic, emanation theology. Yes, yes. It certainly works.
Mother,
Yeah.
yeah, my mother claimed she got coal on Christmas, so her father was playing a joke on her. So there's at least one
Traumatized.
person said they got coal.
Somebody has to.
Hey, in this day and age, coal is very valuable with our energy prices. So today a kid might be, I could trade this for gold for a PlayStation. Or something.
Commodities market.
Yeah, different
Get
time.
coal ETF.
Mhm. Awesome. For those of you joining late, yeah, we got Stephen Mandes Thomas. We're discussing a Gnostic and Esoteric Christian view of the holidays. If you have any questions, don't worry about super chatting, but I see a good discussion with everybody. But if you want to support, yeah, always please support AM Biden any way you can. One-time donations, crypto, I'm here. Help keep this Red Pill Cafeteria going. I also wanted to do a little housekeeping. One of the changes I'm doing, moving on, anybody who joins the Patreon, AV Prime, or the new YouTube subscription that I'm starting to get more gated content, a huge amount of the shows will be there, and we can get more risque. I can do one-on-one and go on tirades, and we'll have videos and a whole bunch of stuff in all these channels. But if you join, you can get my new paper, A God in Ruins, The Gnostic Diagnosis of the Human Condition and the Path to Awaken. And that's from Ralph Waldo Emerson's quote, "A man is a God in ruins." And yes, it's a great paper that shows what went wrong, how we fell into this world, what the archons are doing to us, and what's the solution to get out. And that's something that I will focus very much in 2026. So you can get this, anytime you subscribe, you can download this PDF, as well as other levels. You can download my Pistis Sophia study guide, which is a big exploration of Pistis Sophia, the Gnostic Gospel. It comes with quizzes, videos, a whole bunch, and solutions and practices to really tweak and innovate and increase your gnosis. So check it out. And yeah, that's it. Also, for those of you in the Finding Hermes group, I'm doing my presentation tonight on what is gnosis, and that will be available not just for people in the Finding Hermes, but on certain levels of YouTube, Patreon, and AB Prime. So I will tell you how to employ this spiritual tech. So back to reality. Back to God, I got that song in my head now. Never mind. However you want me. Yeah, I forgot who even did that. That old late 90s or early 90s song. But Stephen, what about the 3 wise men, the Magi? What can we say about them, or how do you approach these cats who aren't even 3? We just think they're 3 because there's 3 gifts, but they could have been 500.
Well, 3 is a nice symbolic number, so
Yeah.
we can go with 3. Maybe there were 9. Maybe there were 1,000. So they're 3 astrologers, right? And probably they're Zoroastrian priests who come from the East. And this is one of these cool things that even if you just stick within the most orthodox and mainstream elements of the tradition, there's so much interesting stuff it's not even hiding in plain sight. It's just in plain sight. So the beginning of the Christian story is that a group of wizards use astrology to figure out when the Messiah is going to be born, and they come and they offer him magical gifts like gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gold, of course, is the alchemist's metal. It symbolizes the sun and Saturn at the same time, symbol of kingship. Frankincense is this magical incense which is offered to gods, to divine beings, the incense of the sun. And myrrh, of course, is another incense, which is, there's Saturn again. And so those two concepts of the sun and Saturn are woven together there. Set that aside. Like the point is, just the fact of them being there makes the whole thing magic from day one. In the book, I talked about them a little more, and I presented an initiation, which you can do on the Feast of the Epiphany, which is the day when the Magi come and offer their gifts.
January 6th, yeah. Odd that date. It's almost like they did it on purpose, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
With today's, with the whole whatever that incident that happened and all that. So it's always very, very, very interesting. Yeah, and also for the audience, please remember that we've been conditioned to think that this star was static, and they sort of went to it. But the truth is, this star was moving. It was more of a satellite, or in today's audience, a UFO, right? It had to be a UFO.
Yeah, that whole sequence is magic from the beginning. I mean, you have Joseph, who he thinks that his fiancée is pregnant, and he's gonna, call the whole thing off. And he encounters an angel in a dream who says, "No, don't worry about it. It's fine." They go to their hometown on the day for the census. She gives birth, and the wizards come. And the wizards are warned in another dream, another magical vision, that they had better sneak out of town because the king's going to come to kill them. Like, at this point, we're in the magical world, and the attempt to kind of make it mundane, historical, tedious, boring, it doesn't really work without doing violence to the whole thing.
No, agreed. Yeah, and I think the Magi go to see Herod, and it's quite the drama.
Yeah,
it really is quite the drama. Another thing about your book, and I'm sure this is a hard one for people to, including myself, is fasting from technology, from the tech. And you write, do you think we've gone through a second fall to these place of digital illusions? Well, it's not even, that's not a myth, that's a fact.
Yeah.
It's just based on so many other ancient myths. So you suggest this is a good time, especially, we're all getting with the shopping and wrapping presents, and there's a little quietude, try to get away from technology, or what do you suggest, Stephen?
Yeah. And maybe let me start from kind of first principles or whatever on that one.
Mm-hmm.
So Advent's traditionally a fasting season. They've mostly called off fasting in the modern Catholic Church. The Orthodox are still pretty rigorous about it.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, fasting from food is a good idea. It can be difficult to impossible depending on your station in life. I mean, if you're doing any kind of manual labor, try to go without a large meal in the morning, and you'll just pass out halfway through the day. Now, the way I approach the whole thing is with these mythical images. The idea here is that the original fall of man from the garden is an image of the descent of the soul into matter. And that's the whole bit about the garments of skin, right? The soul was naked, meaning it was part of the spiritual world, and then the human soul descends into matter, and we have this myth that we've been given as a way of understanding that. Now, there are hints, and I've been exploring this further in some of the writing I've been doing recently, hints in some of the older occult writings, and sometimes straightforward statements, that there's another level below the level of nature, which we can call the level of the subnatural, which is the natural habitat, if you like, of demonic spirits and evil spirits. It's sort of hell.
Mm.
The notion that I'm working with is, just as that first fall is the descent of the soul into matter, and maybe there's actually a second fall there before this one with the reforms of Josiah that we were talking about earlier, but that's a story for another time.
Yeah, that's Margaret Barker territory. Which
yeah.
is,
Oh, yeah. I think
Yeah,
you called her the goat the other
she
day.
is a goat. I mean, she
Yeah.
has an eye that is, I've never seen I've never seen a scholar with such an amazing eye on
I know.
detail in history. Yeah.
Totally brilliant. Could do a whole different show on
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
You've probably done a dozen, but so we have the descent of the soul into matter, and that's actually one of the reasons that fasting from food is important historically, because when you limit your food intake and when you stop using meat specifically, you withdraw from the material world. Your body's made out of meat. Living entirely from vegetables lets you disconnect from the body. But now, what I'm suggesting is that over the course of the last centuries and accelerating rapidly since the 90s, and then kicking into overdrive with the invention of so-called AI, we've gone down another level. We're now, because now we're barely in our bodies in the first place, not because we're deliberately withdrawing from them in order to ascend higher, but because we're spending all of our time in these digital worlds, right? We're sitting there, half our day is spent in this posture, right?
Right.
Interacting with a world that doesn't really even exist. And so much of the material there is so obviously toxic. Like if we talk about the levels of consciousness within the astral plane, constant, overpowering, reactive emotion, that's the bottom end of the astral plane. And that's where people live out their days on the internet. So my suggestion in this book and in a lot of my other writings is take the fasting periods and use them as a time to withdraw from digital technology in a way that's appropriate to you, right? So each of us have things that we have to do. Like, we're having this conversation mediated by the internet. We're grateful for it and we're glad to be here. That's something that we're not going to fast from. But what can we do? And then it depends on the individual, and the place to look at is whatever is eating up most of your time and most of your energy. So someone might have a problem with like internet gambling, and that's what they need to abstain from during the time period. Someone else, like I tend to get really into news and politics. There's nothing healthy or positive about it. And what I notice, like nothing. And what I notice, because I began this a number of years ago during Lent, is that when you stop interacting with that stuff in any way, the world looks really, really different. And you realize that most of it was fake, and most of the stuff that you thought you were angry about, that was like someone else being angry on your behalf, and you just kind of consuming that emotion. So that's my recommendation. Take Advent, and then there are the other fasting periods at the other points of the year. There's Lent. There is a period called St. Michael's Lent, which goes from the Feast of the Assumption on August 15th through Michaelmas on September 29th. Take those as a time to withdraw in a way suitable for you. And don't just withdraw, but try to return. It's like somebody like Plotinus, say, living around the 3rd century. Plotinus didn't need nature spirituality because his world was nature. Even when he was in a house, he was basically in a natural environment. We do need nature spirituality. I think that's why modern kind of nature traditions like contemporary Druidry, which I've also been involved with, that appears right with the Industrial Revolution, because that's right as people are sinking down into an artificial world. That's when nature becomes something that you have to ascend back to.
Yeah, it is true. It is very true. And it's also interesting that I know people take it too far to the nature loving, but they have to realize the ancients didn't love nature. Sometimes they hated nature and the gods because it was so destructive and dangerous, but you were part of the system. You had a nature, you were part of nature. I think Gary Lockman very astutely once told me on the show, there wasn't the first time you have somebody in history talking about, I'm going to go enjoy nature, is in the 13th century with the Italian poet Petrarch. He writes, I'm going to go see the view of the mountains. Before that, it wasn't alien for humans to, oh, I'm going to enjoy nature. This was the first time where we start loving nature. But before that, I would say we were just part of nature. We were part of the system. We neither loved nor hated it. It just was.
Exactly. And that's why their spiritual life is focused on rising above nature. And we still want to do that. We still want to get all the way back. Yeah. But you kind of have to take one rung of the ladder at a time, right? So you can go and spend 2 hours in the woods. I also have been recommending taking up a lot of these physical practices, which are not just like working out in a gym with headphones plugged into the internet anyway, but things like Qigong, yoga, where you're cultivating natural energies and you're inhabiting your body. That's like the next step up toward transcending your body.
Yeah, well said. As the Corpus Hermeticum says, man is in between heaven and earth. We are both. So we have to spend time with the gods and spend time with the animals to be fully human. So it's what we do. What do you think, Vance? Anything on your end or the chat?
Yeah, we got questions. So let's get to some of those. First of all, Pontian God wants to know, compared to Paul Hudson mastering witchcraft, are there any similarities to your teachings?
I have no idea. I'm sorry. I've never heard of Paul Hudson. I mean, if you go through this book, you will find a lot of these holidays or saints' days were times when they would do what we would now call witchcraft. Like St. Andrew's Day was also a time for divination. So I've included some of those traditions in there. So that's sort of traditional witchcraft. If again, I don't know Mr. Hudson, but if his approach to witchcraft is based on that eightfold wheel of the year that modern Wiccans have adopted, you're going to find a lot of similarities, because all of those 8 stations are major feasts of the traditional Christian church, and they're also major shifts in the movement of the elemental energies. So if he writes about that, then the answer is yes. If not, then I don't know.
Who knows? All righty. Also, our friend Michael P. Frank, greetings, Michael. Good, always good to see you in the chat here.
Oh yeah,
always has good things to say. He posits maybe spiritual energy that converts food into your consciousness is instead used to enlighten you if you fast. That's his question.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Yeah, definitely. How do I want to think about that? The spiritual energy that converts food into your consciousness is instead, he's suggesting that maybe that energy is freed up from converting food into body to maybe converting body into spirit, or raising the soul on the planes. And I think that's a good way to look at it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. And let's see, we've got Last Idealist. How do you balance not desiring to participate but having to cause a family? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that phrase actually he was intending there. But I think the whole idea is balancing. He doesn't want to participate, but he wants to still associate with family in some way.
Okay. Well, maybe that refers to the idea of withdrawing from technology that I was referring to, because that's sort of the non-participation aspect here. But I'm not suggesting don't participate in the life of your family. I'm saying participate in that. Don't participate in the fake life of the digital world, because none of that's real. And I have no idea if this is really what he was getting at, but I think everybody knows somebody who's broken up their actual family, who's not talking to their sister or their dad or their cousin or something, because they have different opinions about things that they read online.
Right.
So I'm saying stop
or
doing
who they voted for, something silly and
temporal. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the internet told me that my dad's a dick, so
Well, he says exactly. So I think my paraphrasing is probably close to what he meant.
Good,
He's
good.
also talking about materialism.
Oh, about materialism? Materialism philosophically, or materialism in terms of the usual sense of wanting to get lots of money to buy stuff? Because materialism philosophically, you don't need to teach your children to be materialists, and you shouldn't, because it's a fake philosophy. In terms of the focus on buying stuff, I mean, we all have to live here. You need things to survive, and you also want to enjoy your time here. Like, you should get your kids Christmas presents, and you should enjoy a nice holiday feast. You don't want to be ruled by those things.
Right. Or be lockstep, in just, well, I have got to buy presents, so I'll just get this, or I'll just get that. And I think a true gift is something that connects you with the other person. In other words, you think, well, this person would really enjoy this, or I know he loves these things. And so it's to instill, happiness in the other person through material things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as opposed to, well, I got, like, sending a gift card is, the physicist is, well, I don't know this guy, but I don't know what he wants, so here, have some money.
Right.
Which is just as fake as money itself.
Yeah, so the real gift is like a physical embodiment of the relationship. And so that's a material object in service of something higher. Right?
Yes,
Where
I agree.
Buying stuff to buy stuff is the higher thing, which is the human being and the family serving something lower, which is goodies.
Yeah, and also serving the greed of the purveyors of such goodies.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Don't feed the greed.
Yeah, going back to the Santa Claus thing, that's like the lowest manifestation of the Santa Claus spirit. It's not Santa Pandemos. Yeah. It's whatever the Greek word for the next level down is. Santa Infernus or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for the audience, his book does cover a lot of ground, many more rituals from the wreath. He talks about the Rosicrucians. Yeah, Stephen goes broad, but again gives you the rituals and attitudes to get through to thrive in the holidays from a spiritual, metaphysical level and other parts of the year. And yeah, but in keeping in theme of the show, as we get towards the end, let's talk about the Gnostics. You talk about the Gospel of Thomas, and you mentioned St. Thomas and his feast day. Tell the audience what they can find in your book about the Gospel of Tommy. Tommy, can you hear me? Is the Who saying?
Can you hear me? Yeah, so the Feast of St. Thomas is December 21st, if memory serving correctly. And again, that was a traditional holiday. It was a smoke night where they would take incense and they would bless their barns and their home and their cows. Mm-hmm. And you definitely can and should do that. But what I also suggested, I like to write with more than one idea in mind so that you can approach my books from different perspectives. I don't want to tell you what to think. I want to give you ideas to work with. So you can adopt the traditional customs around St. Thomas Day and the mainstream or orthodox understanding of Thomas. But if you do have any Gnostic leanings, this would be a really good time to break out the Gospel of Thomas and do some from it. And I'm for me personally, Thomas and Philip are two of my key scriptures.
Yeah, Philip's great. That has more of a Valentinian thing. Thomas is relatable, but if you grew up Catholic or Greek Orthodox, Philip is really relatable. Talks about sacraments and other things, Mary and the Holy Spirit getting pregnant. It definitely covers more ground for sure.
Absolutely.
And they're both kind of listical, so it's not like you can you can just read every day, or a few sayings and meditate upon them, right, Stephen? And sort of
Exactly. I
contemplate.
mean, you could do a little bit of bibliomancy, divination with a book on St. Thomas Day with the Gospel of Thomas. Open it up, and one particular logion is going to jump out at you. And you can take that as a guide for that moment or for the remainder of the year if you like, because the day, it coincides with the winter solstice. So that's the rebirth of the year. So you could do a little ritual where you invoke St. Thomas, break out his gospel, ask for guidance over the year to come, and which of the sayings in that gospel jumps out. That's what you need to be working with, meditating on, taking as a guide.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Almost like a Gnostic I Ching. I love that
Yeah.
story that some fundamentalist Christian used to do bibliomancy too, and he opens
Oh
the
yeah.
Bible and he goes, "Today you will die," and he's like, "Oh no, this is wrong," and then he goes like that, "Thus says the Lord." So it's like he was trapped in his fate or something.
Well,
There's
not
other
much to do at
variations
that point.
that are fun. Yeah, they're fun.
Yeah.
You know, there's one thing I don't think we have mentioned too much on this show, and today's show at least, is that Jesus, right? It's supposed to be celebrating the birth of Jesus, and I know they kind of messed around with that and kind of tweaked it into occurring on December 25th and the solstice.
Right.
But what do you have to say about that? I mean, in terms of your magical practice and so forth, what role would Jesus have?
Great question. Probably something to discuss at Christmas time, right?
I don't
And
know.
I mean, first, I think that it was a really good thing that they put the celebration of his birth when they did. This is another one of these things where myth is more important than history. And nature as itself, a kind of mythic image in the story of the year, it's as if nature itself is a myth. And what moment in the natural cycle is perfect for the birth of the Son of God is obviously the rebirth of the sun.
Right.
I almost wish that Australians and people in South America would start celebrating Christmas on June 25th. It would make a lot more sense for them.
Right.
Like, it really would. And part of the way I look at it, so the Christmas story begins with a census, right? Everybody has to go back to their hometown because Caesar has ordered a census of the entire world. Now, the thing about the census in ancient times was it was very often a time when you went back to your hometown to participate in a ritual of atonement to the god of your city. So an Athenian would return to Athens and participate in this ritual of atonement to Athena or Hephaestus, who ruled Athens. Maybe a Spartan is invoking Zeus. In another city, it's another deity. If there's a census of the whole world, then the God that's being revealed is the God of the whole world. And who is that? And this is again where we can draw on Margaret Barker, because we have this idea from her writings and from others too. Like I think probably some of Russell Gemerkin's ideas are useful here too. The truth, I think, is somewhere in between them historically, but who cares about history? God Most High, and that's what Jesus is called, Son of the Most High, is not the same as any of the particular gods of the nations. He's the demiurge in the Platonic sense, not the Gnostic sense. He's not the snake with the head of the cat knocking ornaments off the Christmas tree, right? That's like a lower order manifestation of the demiurge. The true demiurge is the creator of the entire universal system. And you can see the difference because the great discussion of the work of that demiurge is not in the Bible, it's in Plato's Timaeus. And what does Plato say? Because God was good, there was no jealousy in him. That's a bit different from what we're used to in the discussions of Yahweh. There's a distinction there. If the son of the creator is being born, it's the son of that God who is all good and in whom there is no jealousy. and who's taking on this human form. And it's also a representation of this entire course of the descent of the human soul into matter and its return to the divine, right? Because you have the original human being is Adam, whose name just means man, and he's kind of a dyadic figure, Adam, Eve. They descend, they go through the cycle of history and incarnation and return as Mary and Jesus, or Mary Jesus. So on the one hand, he's literally the mind of the creator, eternally in the divine. On the other hand, he's this historical figure, but also he is that divine light within all of mankind, descending into matter and returning ultimately to the intellectual plane, to God.
Well said,
Love
indeed. Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, we are at the end. Stephen, I've got on the show notes your Substack. Anywhere else you want to send them, or is that that you want? That's where you want peeps to check you out. Besides, going to and buying your book, I also have your book on the show notes too. If somebody wants to get it, the Sacramental Magic of Advent: A Guide to Christian Ceremonial Ritual at Christmas. Anywhere else?
Well, I think that's it. Check out the book. There will be another one out. You can't write a Christmas book without being asked to write an Easter book, so that'll be next. And I continue to explore these ideas on my Substack. I've been posting daily. That usually falls off eventually, but for now, there's something new every day.
Awesome. Well, it'd be great to have you back during Easter time and check it out. Yeah, look forward to that book. Awesome. Well, we are at the end. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for being here. Vance, thanks for keeping us company.
Okay, I'll go back to enjoying my Christmas tree and the holiday.
Absolutely.
Hopefully,
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Same to you.
Stephen, always enjoy having you here. And yes, please have a Merry Christmas with you and your loved ones. And I hope, well, if you get some coal, just go trade it for something valuable. If Santa brings you that. But for everybody else, yes, indeed, please have a great Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and we will see you next week with our year review predictions for 2026, and then David Block will hit us hard with one of his presentations right as 2026 starts. But in the meantime, I really appreciate your company, your support, and you being who you are and lighting up this dark universe. Take care, everybody. And again, as always, thank you. Join Patreon, AB Prime, or Red Circle and get the full episode and podcast summary and other cool bonuses. Clean episodes on a private RSS feed. Exclusive stream shows early and no more commercials. Support Eon Byte.